The ballroom was silent in the way that only important rooms could be silent. Not peaceful, watchful. 200 candles cast dancing shadows across the cream-colored walls of Buckingham Palace. Outside, the London rain hammered against the tall windows. Inside, the royal family gathered for their annual spring dinner, the kind of event that hadn't been cancelled in 60 years. Catherine sat at the long dining table. Her pearl necklace catching the candlelight. She had been preparing for this evening for months. Her dress was perfection. Her hair was perfection. Everything about her was exactly as it should be. Except she was terrified. She knew what everyone knew. The rumors had been spreading through palace corridors and gossip columns for weeks. And tonight, Camilla would be here. Camilla, who had been conspicuously absent from public events for months. Camilla, who Catherine hadn't faced directly since the incident in the private apartments 3 weeks ago. If you've ever felt tension, so thick you could barely breathe. You know what Catherine was experiencing right now? The kind of tension that makes your heart beat in your ears. That makes every sound seem too loud. That makes you wonder if everyone else can see what you're feeling written across your face. The doors opened. Staff members moved silently through the room, placing dishes of roasted partridge and seasonal vegetables before each guest. Catherine kept her eyes down. She took a sip of water. Her hands were steady. That was good. That was necessary. The world was watching. It always was. Then she heard the footsteps. Deliberate. Approaching. A low voice that had haunted her nightmares. Camilla. Catherine's entire body tensed. She could sense Camilla before she could see her. The smell of expensive perfume. The rustle of a designer gown. The invisible weight of another woman's presence demanding attention. Catherine forced herself to look up. Camilla stood there in a burgundy dress that must have cost more than most people earned in a year. Her smile was sharp. Her eyes were sharper. She was looking at Catherine with an expression that was neither entirely warm nor entirely cold. It was something else entirely. Something that carried a history. Something that carried hurt. They had been friends once. Before everything changed. Before the palace had become a place where you couldn't be sure who was standing with you and who was standing against you. "Darling," Camilla said to the Queen, moving past her seat. But those eyes stayed on Catherine for just a fraction too long. Catherine's breath caught. She looked away, reached for her wineglass, and found her hand was trembling just slightly. She set it down. She couldn't let anyone see. If people noticed cracks in her composure, speculation would begin. Reporters would dig. Stories would grow. What had been a private confrontation would become a public scandal. One of the guards, a tall man with steady eyes and a perfectly pressed uniform, noticed the tension immediately. He was positioned against the wall near Catherine's seat. Part of the security detail that was always present but usually invisible. His name was James. He had been on protection duty for 4 years. He had never seen Catherine look frightened before. He saw it now. The dinner continued. Course after course appeared and disappeared. Conversation flowed around them. Laughter erupted at appropriate moments. But underneath it all, something dangerous was building. Like a storm gathering just beyond the horizon, Catherine felt it. Camilla felt it. And James, standing against that wall in his dress uniform, felt it too. He had been trained to notice small things. The way Camilla kept adjusting her position. The way Catherine's jaw was clenched. The way the two women seemed to exist in a separate atmosphere from everyone else at the table. Then came the moment that would change everything. Camilla reached for the wine bottle. She leaned forward. She was going to say something. Catherine could feel it coming. Could feel the words gathering in the other woman's throat like a storm front. If you're watching this, you've probably felt that sensation before. That moment when you know something is about to happen and you can't stop it. That's when James made his choice. That's when everything shifted. Subscribe now if you want to know what he did next, because this is where the real story begins. James had been trained for many things. He had studied protective protocols. He had learned how to identify threats before they manifested. He had practiced scenarios in rooms with other security personnel, playing out endless variations of danger and response. But nothing had quite prepared him for the look in Camilla's eyes as she leaned toward. Catherine. The conversation at the table had shifted. The Queen was discussing the upcoming garden party. The Prince was making a rare joke about his recent trip to Asia. For a moment, everyone was distracted. For a moment, the room's attention was divided. Among multiple conversations and wine refills and the pleasure of good food and beautiful surroundings, that was when Camilla moved. It wasn't a dramatic movement. There was nothing theatrical about it. She simply leaned closer to Catherine's seat, her voice low enough that only a few people nearby would hear. James couldn't make out the words, but he could read her body language. He could see the angle of her shoulders. He could see the intensity in the set of her mouth. Catherine's reaction was immediate and visceral. Her fork froze halfway to her plate. Her eyes widened fractionally. Color drained from her cheeks, a small thing that would have gone unnoticed by most of the room. But that James caught instantly. The kind of reaction you got from a threat. From something that had struck exactly where it was meant to strike, James moved before he fully understood why. It wasn't a conscious decision, not exactly. It was instinct honed by years of observation and training. He shifted his position. He stepped forward. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would draw attention from the entire room. Just enough to position himself between the two women. Just enough to intercede. His movement was smooth enough that no one seemed to notice. No one except Camilla, who looked up at him with an expression that was pure, crystalline anger. She hadn't said whatever it was she had been about to say. But she was communicating plenty with that single glance. The guard looked back at her with a steady, professional expression. No judgment. No emotion. Just the calm presence of someone whose job was to maintain boundaries. His job was protection. Sometimes that meant protecting against physical threats. Sometimes it meant something else entirely. Camilla leaned back in her chair. She picked up her wine glass. She took a long, deliberate sip. Her hands were steady. Her face had arranged itself back into an expression of composed elegance. If anyone had been watching her, they might have thought nothing had happened at all, but something had happened. Catherine felt it. She released a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Some of the tension drained from her shoulders. The rest of the table remained blissfully unaware. Dinner continued. The courses came and went. More wine was poured. Someone made a toast to family bonds and loyalty. The irony was sharp enough to cut. After the main course, there was a break. The staff began clearing plates. Coffee and dessert would be served in the drawing room. Guests rose from the table in a gradual, coordinated way, the particular way that royalty and those accustomed to formal events moved. Never rushed. Never undignified. Always aware of being watched, even when no one was watching, Catherine stood as well. She steadied herself on the table for just a moment. She nodded to the Queen. She prepared to move toward the drawing room with the others. That's when Camilla spoke. "Catherine," she said. Her voice wasn't loud. It was quiet, actually. Almost intimate. But it carried weight. A word. Perhaps in the corridor? The room heard. Not everyone, but enough people turned slightly. Enough eyes flickered in their direction. Enough attention was drawn to a simple request that shouldn't have seemed unusual at all. Except for the fact that it was Camilla making the request, and Catherine who was being asked. And there was nothing simple about it. James saw the panic flicker across Catherine's face before she controlled it. He saw her hands clench briefly at her sides. He saw her look around as if searching for an exit that didn't exist. The Queen watched from where she stood. Her expression was neutral, but her eyes were sharp. The Prince paused mid-conversation. Even the other guests seemed to sense that something was shifting. "Of course," Catherine said. Her voice was perfectly calm, perfectly poised. Nothing in her tone betrayed the fear that James could see in the set of her shoulders, the tension in her neck. The way her chest was rising and falling slightly faster than before. She moved toward the corridor, toward privacy, toward whatever it was Camilla needed to say so badly that she had to say it now. In this moment, in front of all these witnesses, James made a decision. He began moving toward the corridor as well. Not obviously. just as part of the general flow of people leaving the dining room. But his path would take him close enough to the corridor entrance. Close enough to hear if he needed to hear. Close enough to see if he needed to see. He wasn't supposed to do this. His protocols were clear. Security detail positioned themselves in designated areas. They didn't follow family members into private conversations. They didn't intercede unless there was a direct physical threat. But James had seen something in Catherine's eyes. Something that suggested this moment might require more than protocol. He was about to find out exactly how complicated his night was going to become. The corridor stretched long and dimly lit. Portraits of long-dead royals lined the walls, their painted eyes seeming to follow the two women as they walked. Catherine's heels echoed softly against the polished marble floor. Each step felt like it was taking her further from safety, deeper into something she couldn't control. Camilla stopped at a section of the corridor where a large painting hung some Victorian duchess, her expression inscrutable and eternal. It was far enough from the dining room that their conversation wouldn't carry, close enough to the main palace areas that they wouldn't be completely alone. The choice of location was deliberate. Everything Camilla did was deliberate. "I need you to understand something," Camilla began. Her voice was low, controlled, but underneath it ran a current of emotion, anger, hurt, something deeper than either of those things. "What you did 3 weeks ago in the apartments was unforgivable." Catherine's hands were shaking now. She didn't try to hide it. There was no one here to hide from except Camilla, and Camilla already knew her too well. They had shared confidences. They had shared secrets. They had been friends. And friendship meant knowing exactly where to strike if you ever needed to cause damage. "You know why I did it?" Catherine said quietly. "I know what you told yourself," Camilla replied. "I'm not sure that's the same thing." Outside, thunder rolled across the London sky. The sound seemed to echo through the corridor, through the palace, through the space between these two women who had once been inseparable. Back in the dining room, James moved with practiced casualness. He excused himself from his position, moving through the thinning crowd toward the corridor entrance. He positioned himself near the doorway. From here, he could see the two figures in the distance. He couldn't hear them clearly, but he could see Catherine's posture. He could see the way she was standing small, defensive, compressed into herself as if trying to make herself disappear. He could see Camilla's hands gesturing, controlled but animated, punctuating words with emphasis. "You went to the Queen," Camilla continued. "You told her things that were said in confidence, things that were between us. Do you understand what you did? Do you understand what it means when trust like that is broken?" "You were wrong," Catherine said. "About what you were planning? I couldn't just let you. That wasn't your decision to make." Camilla's voice rose slightly. She caught herself, lowered it again. "That wasn't your right. And now, I'm being investigated by the palace. I'm being questioned. My reputation is being examined because of what you did." Catherine's face had gone pale. "I did what I thought was right. Right?" Camilla laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Catherine, you chose the institution over our friendship. You chose protocol over loyalty. And now, you want to stand here and tell me you did what was right?" Catherine didn't respond. What could she say? They both knew the truth. In the moment that had mattered, Catherine had faced a choice. Her friend or her duty. She had chosen duty. James could see tears forming in Catherine's eyes, even from a distance. He could see her trying to hold them back, trying to maintain composure in case anyone was watching, trying to be professional, appropriate, dignified, trying to be everything a person in her position was supposed to be. But she didn't look like someone strong in that moment. She looked like someone broken. "I've tried to forgive you," Camilla said, and something in her voice shifted. The anger was still there, but underneath it was something raw. Something that sounded like grief. "I've tried for 3 weeks to come to terms with it. And then the Queen decided that I should attend tonight's dinner, as if nothing had happened. As if we were all just one happy family. And I sat through that entire meal looking at you, and I realized I can't forgive you. I don't know if I ever will." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Catherine's face crumpled slightly, then recovered. She straightened her shoulders. She made herself stand taller. "Then I'm sorry," Catherine said quietly. "I'm sorry that I can't be the friend you wanted me to be. But I'm not sorry for what I did. Someone had to stop you, and no one else would." Camilla stared at her. In that moment, they weren't friends navigating a conflict. They were enemies navigating an irretrievable loss. "Then we have nothing more to say to each other." Camilla turned away. That's when James heard the sound. Not loud, but distinct. The sound of one of the other guards, the one positioned near the main staircase, suddenly calling out. Not in alarm, but in surprise. Confusion. Something had happened. Something that would pull them all away from this private grief and into a different kind of crisis entirely. James didn't know it yet. But this moment of two women standing in a dimly lit corridor with their friendship in ruins, this was about to become the smallest part of something much larger and far more dangerous. The sound came again. This time, it was clearer. A voice shouting something that James couldn't quite make out, but that had an edge of urgency to it. Catherine's head snapped up. Camilla turned back toward the main hallway, her anger momentarily displaced by confusion. James moved immediately. His years of training activated without conscious thought. He walked quickly toward the disturbance, his radio already in hand. Before he could speak into it, his colleague's voice crackled through. "Perimeter breach. East Gate. Someone's gotten through the fence. Security is responding." The words landed heavy in the palace. James could feel the shift in energy, could feel the moment when the evening's comfortable routine transformed into something urgent and uncertain. Catherine and Camilla emerged from the corridor, their private conflict suddenly insignificant. Other staff members were moving quickly through the halls. The ambient noise of the dinner party had changed to something sharper. Questions being asked. Doors being closed. Security protocols activating. The Queen appeared, flanked by her own security detail. Her face was calm, but her eyes were alert. This wasn't the first time the palace had faced a security concern, and it wouldn't be the last. But it changed everything about the evening. "What do we know?" the Queen asked. "Early stages," James reported, his voice steady and professional. "Someone breached the east perimeter. Could be a trespasser. Could be a protester. Police are being notified." The prince had emerged now as well. He was on his phone, speaking to someone in security operations. His voice was clipped, efficient. Years of training meant knowing how to respond in these moments. The dinner guests, realizing something was wrong, had begun gathering in small clusters. Some looked concerned. Others seemed almost excited, the particular thrill that came from being near a situation that was slightly dangerous but ultimately controlled. For most of them, this would be a story to tell for years. A dramatic moment at a palace dinner. For everyone else, it was a threat that needed to be contained. "Where's Catherine?" someone asked. James turned to see Camilla looking around. Despite everything that had just happened between them, some old instinct had activated. Camilla's eyes were searching the hall for Catherine. The concern on her face was genuine, but Catherine had seen the Queen and moved toward her. A natural response to crisis. She was now part of the inner circle that was coordinating the response. She was exactly where she should be. "East Gate is locked down," another guard reported through the radio. "We have visual confirmation of at least 2 individuals on the grounds. One appears to be heading toward the north wing." "North wing?" the prince said sharply. "That's where the private residences are." An electric current of genuine danger ran through the palace. This wasn't a perimeter breach by some curious trespasser. This was someone with purpose. Someone who knew the layout. Someone who was heading toward the private areas where members of the family actually lived. James felt his entire being shift into protective mode. The tensions of the evening, Catherine and Camilla's friendship destroyed. The palace, simmering with emotion, all of it, became secondary to this new threat. Security personnel were mobilizing. The guards who had been standing against walls, invisible and decorative, became active and alert. Weapons were visible now. The palace was transforming before everyone's eyes from a space of civility and tradition into a fortress. "We need to move the family to the secure room," the Queen's head of security said. "What about the guests?" the prince asked. They'll be escorted to the drawing room. It's secure, easily monitored. They'll be fine. Catherine was standing close to the Queen now, as was protocol. The Queen's hand reached out and briefly touched her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance, or perhaps something more. Catherine was young. Catherine was still learning how to navigate these moments. Catherine needed grounding. Then the Queen looked at Camilla. Camilla was standing slightly apart from the main group, watching the chaos unfold with a sort of detached fascination. The Queen's expression changed slightly. Recognition of something. Understanding of something more complex than the immediate crisis. "Camilla," the Queen said, "come with us." It wasn't a question. It was an instruction. Camilla hesitated for just a fraction of a second. She looked at Catherine. Catherine looked away, then back. There was something unspoken that passed between them, some acknowledgement that despite everything, they were still tied together, still part of the same institution, still facing threats to that institution together. Camilla nodded. She moved toward the Queen, toward the corridor that led to the secure rooms. Catherine moved to follow. That's when the screaming started. It came from somewhere above them. Not a guest's scream, not someone's shocked reaction to the excitement. This was something different. This was fear. Pure, uninhibited fear. James's head snapped up. His hand moved to his radio. His eyes locked on the ceiling as if he could see through it to whatever was happening. On the floor above, "We have a hostage situation." A guard's voice crackled through the radio, breathless, urgent. "Third floor." One of the staff members. "Someone's got her. They've barricaded the door to the library." The secure room was supposed to be the safest place in the palace. Reinforced walls, multiple exits. Communication systems that connected directly to Scotland Yard and the Prime Minister's office. The Queen sat in her backed chair, her composure absolute, her mind clearly working through scenarios and probabilities. The Prince was on the phone with the Metropolitan Police Commissioner. Catherine stood near a window, though there was nothing to see from here except blank walls and panic held carefully under control. Camilla was pacing, which violated every protocol about royal behavior, but which no one seemed willing to correct given the circumstances. Her anger about Catherine had been temporarily replaced by something more primal, the survival instinct that kicked in when institutions became dangerous places. James was outside the secure room, coordinating with other security personnel. The situation was unfolding in real time, and the information was fragmentary and terrifying. The woman being held hostage was a member of the kitchen, Staff Young, new to the palace. She had been working late in the library, organizing books for an event next week. She hadn't been a target. She had simply been there when an opportunity presented itself. The individual holding her had a knife. That much was confirmed. Why he was in the palace at all was still being determined. Police were flooding the grounds now. The palace, which had always felt like a sanctuary, had become a crime scene. "How did he get past security?" the Prince asked, his voice tight with anger, directed at himself and everyone else. "He was in the catering truck," someone reported. "Had false credentials. We're reviewing the vetting process now, but essentially we found a significant failure," which meant James thought that there would be inquiries, there would be reviews, there would be fallout. But right now in this moment, the only thing that mattered was the girl on the third floor with a knife at her throat and the man holding her, who was clearly willing to do something dramatic. "What does he want?" the Queen asked quietly. "We're still establishing communication. He's demanding media attention first. He wants his message broadcast." "What message?" Catherine asked. "We're not entirely sure yet. He's not been coherent. Possible mental health crisis? Possible political motivation? It's unclear." It's from inside the secure room. Neither the Queen nor the Prince could do anything but wait, which was perhaps the hardest part of leadership in moments like these. Necessity of being still while everyone else moved frantically around a situation that threatened everything. In the corridor outside, James was receiving real-time updates. The crisis negotiators were in place. The girl was terrified but hadn't been harmed. The man was becoming increasingly agitated. He had mentioned knowing someone in the palace. He had mentioned a grievance. He'd mentioned Catherine specifically. That's when James felt the weight of the moment shift. Catherine's name. The hostage-taker knew Catherine, knew her enough to demand her specifically. James went to the secure room door and requested permission to enter. The Queen granted it with a look. He moved inside and spoke quietly to the prince, who listened with his jaw gradually clenching. "He knows her?" Catherine asked, fear blooming across her face. "He's mentioned you," James said carefully. "We need to understand why. Do you have any idea who he might be? Anyone you've encountered recently who seemed disturbed or threatening?" Catherine's mind was working through it. "I don't know. I meet so many people. There are letters sometimes. It's unstable people who fixate on members of the family. Could be anyone." "There's another option," Camilla said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. What if this isn't about Catherine directly? What if it's about something else entirely? What if mentioning Catherine is just part of his narrative? The Queen and the Prince exchanged a look. It was the kind of look that people who had known each other for decades could exchange without words. Camilla might be in conflict with the institution and with Catherine, but she was still family. She was still part of the collective that had to survive this. "We need to know what his grievance is," the Queen said. "James, can you establish what he wants? We're working on it. The negotiators are trying to build rapport, and we wait," the Prince said, "and we hope that someone on the third floor can talk this man down before anyone else gets hurt." But James understood something that the others, protected in their secure room, couldn't quite grasp. This situation was going to require someone to go to the third floor. Someone to face down the man with the knife. Someone to put themselves between the hostage and danger. Someone, he was beginning to suspect, would have to be him. And if the hostage-taker truly knew Catherine, if Catherine was truly part of his motivation, then Catherine might need to be that person as well. The negotiators had been working with the man for 40 minutes when they reported a breakthrough. He was willing to speak to Catherine. Only Catherine. This was his condition for releasing the girl. The Queen rejected the idea immediately. Too risky. Catherine was family. Catherine was her responsibility. Catherine would not be put in danger. But Catherine had other ideas. "If he'll talk to me," Catherine said from her position in the secure room, "then we need to take that opportunity. Isn't that what we always say? Communication before confrontation?" "That's different," the Prince said. "That's policy. This is your safety. Which is more important?" Catherine asked quietly. The question hung in the air. The Queen looked at her niece with an expression that was impossible to fully read. Love, obviously. Fear, certainly. But also something else. Recognition, perhaps, that Catherine had just asked the most important question anyone could ask in that moment. Duty or safety? Institution or individual? "I'll go with her," James said. The words came out before he'd fully made the decision, but once they were spoken, he knew they were right. "I'll be with her the entire time. Your security," the Prince said. "Not a negotiator." "I'm trained to assess threats and respond to them," James replied. "And I'm trained to protect her. I can do both." The palace security chief was contacted. The police commissioner was consulted. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 5 minutes, permission was granted. Catherine changed into different clothes, something less formal, less intimidating. James briefed her on what they were walking into. Dangerous, unpredictable, but also an opportunity to end this before it became worse. The walk to the third floor felt longer than it should have. They moved through corridors Catherine had walked hundreds of times, but which felt utterly transformed now. Every shadow was deeper. Every sound was louder. The palace had become something else entirely. Outside the library door, police negotiators stood ready. They had established a basic understanding. The man would speak to Catherine. James would be allowed inside, positioned where he could act, if necessary. The girl would be released as a show of good faith, or this would end badly. Catherine took a breath. She had been trained for moments like this, in theory anyway. She knew how to be calm, how to be reassuring, how to project confidence even when she was terrified. James could see her hands trembling as the library door was opened. The man inside was thin, hollow-eyed, and clearly in the grip of something deeper than simple political conviction. Mental illness and desperation had marked his face. He was holding the girl who was sobbing quietly. He was holding the knife at an angle that suggested he didn't actually know how to use it. That was somehow more frightening than if he had seemed confident with it. "Catherine," he said, almost with relief. As if he had been waiting so long for this moment, and now that it was here, he could finally explain himself. "You don't know me, but I know you." "I want to understand," Catherine said, her voice steady and calm. "Tell me what happened." It talked. And as he talked, the fragments of his story emerged. He had been a gardener at the palace years ago. He had been fired for stealing. He had decided the theft had been orchestrated a conspiracy by Catherine, who had recommended his termination. None of it was true, but truth seemed irrelevant to him. His narrative was fixed. "You took my life," he said. "You took everything from me." "I didn't," Catherine said gently. "I didn't know you." "I wouldn't have had the power to. Don't lie to me." His voice rose. The knife twitched. The girl whimpered. "I'm not lying," Catherine said. She took a step forward. James moved slightly, ready to intervene. "I'm telling you the truth. You were hurt? Someone hurt you, and you've been carrying that hurt for a long time. I understand that. But this isn't the answer." Something shifted in the man's expression. For just a moment, the aggression drained away, and what was left behind was heartbreak. Pure, uncomplicated heartbreak. The pain of someone who had believed himself wronged, and had let that belief consume him entirely. "Let the girl go," Catherine said, "and then we can talk about what really happened." His hand, which had been so certain, began to waver. James could see him wavering between anger and despair, between violence and surrender. "Let her go," Catherine repeated. "Please." And he did. The knife dropped. His arms fell to his sides. The girl stumbled forward, away from him, directly into James's arms. James moved her toward the door, toward the police officers waiting there, toward safety. The man sank to his knees. Catherine stood there, looking at him, this broken person who had come to the palace looking for someone to blame for his suffering. She didn't judge him. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked sad. "It's going to be okay," she said, even though it wouldn't be okay. He would face legal consequences. His mental illness would be documented in police reports. His delusion would be examined and analyzed. But in that moment, telling him it would be okay seemed like the only humane thing to do. The police moved in and took him into custody. Catherine walked back toward James, and when she looked at him, there were tears running down her face. Not from fear anymore. From the weight of what had just happened, from the collision of duty and compassion that had defined her entire life. "We should go back," James said gently. As they walked down the corridor, Catherine paused. Through a window, she could see Camilla being escorted back toward her chambers by another guard. Camilla saw Catherine as well. Their eyes met for just a moment. No words passed between them. No reconciliation occurred. But something shifted. Something that suggested that friendship, once broken, might not be entirely beyond repair. The palace, which had transformed into something frightening and dangerous, was gradually becoming a palace again. Guards returned to their posts. Staff cleaned up the disruption. The evening's events would be contained, managed, explained away with careful language and strategic omissions. But Catherine would remember standing in that library, facing a man broken by his own belief in his suffering. And she would wonder if she herself might be broken in similar ways, broken by duty. Broken by the necessity of always choosing the institution over the personal connection. And Camilla, returned to her chambers, would wonder if Catherine had chosen differently in that moment, with the man on his knees, than she had chosen. 3 weeks ago with Camilla in the corridor, would wonder if Catherine had finally learned the difference between being right and being human. Outside, the London rain continued to fall. The palace settled back into silence. And in the weeks that followed, the two women would find their way back to each other, not back to friendship exactly, but to something perhaps more valuable. Understanding, the hard-won recognition that family, whatever its definition, couldn't be divided into simple categories of right and wrong, that loyalty could be complicated, that duty could coexist with compassion. The palace would go on. The institution would survive, and Catherine and Camilla would survive as well. forever changed by the night when danger had revealed who they truly were beneath the protocols and the roles they had been trained to perform. Sometimes it takes a crisis to show us who we're actually capable of being.